Hello, everyone. I'm Nick Bradley.
And I'm Dave Bales. Welcome to Not the Situation Room. Joining us is a hacker slash offensive security specialist extraordinaire who
Nice.
needs no introduction, Space Rogue.
Welcome to the party, Space Rogue.
Glad to be here, but you guys didn't tell me there was going to be a party, so let's rock.
It's always a party when we're involved.
Absolutely.
I can't help but feel like this episode was actually meant to be. I know we were talking last week and we were discussing what topics are we going to cover in this episode next week. We didn't know. And then I said, you know what? I want to ask this. I want to ask, why is it so hard to patch your stuff? And then, like Kismet, we had this SharePoint thing happen over the weekend with no patch available.
Wait, we should probably give people like me who have been living under a rock a brief idea of what this SharePoint
Uh-huh.
vulnerability is, though.
Yeah, you live
I
under a
mean,
rock. Okay.
I assume it's bad, right? Or we wouldn't be talking about it. Like, is it remote code execution, CVS score 11, total Armageddon, global thermonuclear war bad? But there is a patch, so is that right?
Okay, well, it's a daisy chain set of vulnerabilities that in the end lead to remote code execution and overall admin privileges. There
Yes,
is a
sir.
patch, but
Good.
here's the worst part. The vulnerability has been around since May of last year. Now, why did it take the folks running SharePoint to move on this so long? I mean, it's not like it was a big secret. This was outed last year at Pwn to Own Vancouver. Pretty public forum, so why the wait?
Well, as far as patching goes, I don't think that they, being the customers, had a choice but to wait. I mean, stuff from Pwn to Own events is properly disclosed to the vendors and not made public, right? I mean, how do you
Theoretically.
respond? How do you respond if you don't know you need to respond, right?
Well, yeah, to answer your question, Nick, yes, the purpose of contests like Pwn to Own is that companies put up money to have these vulnerabilities disclosed in a responsible manner. So Redmond has known theoretically since May of last year about this vulnerability.
Wait, May of last year, like 2024 last
Yeah,
year?
That's the
2024.
one.
All right, it's understandable that it takes time to verify a vuln, write a patch, test a patch, and then roll it out, especially for like a huge complicated code base like SharePoint.
Hmm.
But you're right, 14 months seems like a little bit of on the long side. Now, I hope Microsoft had telemetry indicating that this vulnerability was not being used in the wild. Otherwise, that's not a good look. Well, no matter how you look at it, 14 months is just not a good look.
Yeah, I got nothing. I can't even try to counter that and try to side with them. I got nothing.
Base Rogue 1, Nick 0.
Right? Because I wanted to come on here and bash people for not having mature patch management programs. I got robbed.
Well, customers didn't find out till last Friday, and
Mhm.
what day was that? The day that SharePoint said, stop the presses.
Well, and that's when it's all everybody became secure with these victim companies applying those patches, right? Everybody just applied the patch and everything's done.
Mhm.
That's how it works, right?
Mhm.
Well, you'd think so, but that's not the case here.
Uh,
There are still vulnerable services out there. And why? I'll play devil's advocate. Could be a
As
case
you
of
do
not
so
knowing.
well.
Yeah, I do this so well. You're right. I'd love playing this role. This could be a case of not knowing how the patch is going to affect the company in terms of operations, ordering procedures, security. But we've always said a day or two down beats a month because you're so far infiltrated that recovery becomes next to impossible. So you have to pick your poison. Take a non-production machine and test it. That's what every company should have a test bed for. Or am I missing something here? But again, this isn't the company's fault. They simply didn't know this existed until it was too late, unlike Redmond.
Okay, okay, maybe. This time, right? But from my experience, I'm going to say that even if the patch had come out a week ago, you would still have companies unpatched and getting owned.
Probably the same ones.
And the same thing can be said a month from now.
a year
Luckily,
from
in
now.
luckily in some cases, you have an added layer or layers of security that can block that mess. But nah, we'll still be talking about this in a year.
Well, in the pen test world, we used to have well, we still do, I guess, MS-0867, I think it was, that existed for decades that wasn't patched. And
But it
it's
had a
used,
patch, right?
it had a patch available, but it was like the go-to for your pen testers. They would always look for that vuln first because it was almost always available. And so there's always a long tail on vuln like this. And we all have to clean up our messes at our own companies. And most of us are pretty good at it, but I mean, everybody misses once in a while. And Redmond's no different. We just don't call the vulnerabilities features. Not that they did this time, but they certainly have in the past.
Ladies and gentlemen, Space Road with a truth bomb. I expected nothing less.
Neither did I. But there are tons of moving parts, and now isn't the time for us to do the mudslinging that I would just love to do. But
Yeah, he would. I'll second that.
yeah. But I'll reiterate what we've already said. Patch your stuff and Redmond do better. The victim companies in
Patch your
the
stuff. Not exactly what we say, but we do have to maintain a rating, don't we?
we do.
It's another S word.
Yeah, exactly. So the victims in this are just that. They're victims. They had no idea that their trusted third party excuse me, their trusted third party
You
vendor
couldn't even say that without choking on it.
couldn't. They were doing all that they could to keep them safe, and that vendor failed.
Look, vulnerabilities are infinite for all intents and purposes. There's too many of them to count.
Yeah.
Well, you can't count them, but think about them as infinite. Resources to patch them, on the other hand, are not infinite. I mean, look, things like vulnerability management services exist and are offered by, several different providers. But when you're talking about an enterprise network with thousands or even tens of thousands of endpoints from a dozen different vendors and spread all over the country or the world and understaffed security departments, simple patching just isn't that simple anymore.
Understaffed. That's such not strong enough of a word.
Yeah,
Because
no.
I'm going to stick with my opinion that most companies just do not budget enough funding for patch management or on the whole, security. I and I can't even get into or start on just beating up the lack of emergency response right now. That's a whole nother episode, and we don't have enough time.
Well, that's the shame in all this. It's security, not sales, is the most important part of any business model in the cyber realm. Security. So if you keep your company safe, the sales will continue without interruption. Theoretically, that's the way it works, right? At
But
least not to the extent that they are now.
I mean, well, welcome to late stage capitalism and all that gobbledygook. But I mean, it's true. Companies are looking to make the numbers for this quarter, and they end up
That
kicking.
makes sense. I mean, a
It does,
company needs
but
to make money.
they do it at the cost of kicking the security can down the road for 6 months and make it somebody else's problem, or a year, or 5 years, and the tech debt just keeps building up. They're gambling on the when they get compromised never actually comes, but it always does.
I always I feel like saying this again, when we were talking about this offline. Why do I need a fire department? I've never had a fire.
What if you have one?
And on that note, the opinions expressed here are our own and do not in any way reflect the views of anyone or anything other than us. Thank you all for watching. We'd love to hear your thoughts on what we covered here today.
Do you agree? Disagree? All feedback is welcome.
Like, share, subscribe, comment, and
We'll see you next time.